Let's take another question from Isabel Blake-James.
Is it time to outlaw second jobs for MPs, or would we risk a brain drain from the House of Commons as a result?
Stephen?
I'm not sure we'd certainly risk a brain drain when I look across the benches sometimes. I do have to say it, people who don't seem to partake in conversation very much. But you struck upon an extremely important point, because what we've seen over the course of the last week has shamed us all. We've had Conservative MP after Conservative MP being embroiled in scandals of sleaze. We had the Scottish Conservative leader who forgot to...
Call it what it is. It's not sleaze. Not sleaze, it's corruption. It's barefaced, brown envelope corruption. Call it what it fucking is.
Register £28,000 that he'd earned. £28,000. How many people in this room would forget about £28,000? I mean, for goodness sake.
So was it shaming, Stephen, when the SNP Westminster leader, Ian Blackford, earned £300,000 since 2015? Was that shaming too?
So this is an important point, and I'll address that directly. So Ian Blackford, as I'm sure all of you will be aware, was an incredibly successful individual prior to entering Parliament. And Ian has phased out all of his external directorships. He showed leadership.
Well, he has now, but not before he earned £300,000.
He had to phase them out. He was a successful individual prior to entering Parliament.
It took 5 years to phase them out.
And he has shown leadership in that regard. And that's leadership that's contrary to Boris Johnson. Because what Boris Johnson has done was when one of his MPs who lobbied on behalf of a private company, the Prime Minister didn't show leadership. He sought to cover it up. And what we've seen over the course of the last couple of weeks is a light has been shown on the Conservative Party. And the reality is that we should all be angry about that, because despite everything that's happened over the course of the last couple of weeks, they still believe that it's one rule for them and another rule for the rest of us.
Jordan.
And also, like, if you're just like a person who owns a business or whatever, and then you become an MP, then like that's a little less egregious than just being a paid lobbyist, right? Just getting money under the table from Greensill Capital or from a PPE firm that you then slide contracts into the hands of. These are two completely different things. Like, I agree that, you know, Ian Blackford should have removed his own, you know, personal stuff like at an earlier date. It shouldn't have taken him 5 years to stop having like conflicting interests with his ability to be a member of Parliament. Absolutely 100%. Again, it's just another appeal to hypocrisy, but whatever. Like, I still get that. I still get that he should have done. But that is not the same. That's not the same as Conservative MPs just taking money under the table to put contracts into the hands of incredibly rich investors. And it happens across the board. And it's not just MPs having these second jobs as well. It's also just like through campaign donors too. Like the rot goes extremely fucking high up and extremely far in the vast majority of the Conservative Party, and probably will do for the Labour Party with people like Starmer and Reeves moving forward as well anyway, which is pretty sad to think of, but it is what it is. Or the 26% of Tory MPs were landlords, to which government housing policy has a direct impact on, right? Like, we can look through each individual metric and castigate individuals or whatever. We have to look at the overall system. And I've talked about this before. I posted a really good TikTok about this, in that in bourgeois democracy, where you have to make an appeal to the capitalist class to be able to put forward policy, because because you know, the media is owned by the capitalist class, all that kind of stuff, right? There is always going to be corruption in politics, because to be able to have a platform with which to propagate your ideas, you have to join the media circuit. You have to have a public presence, right? And that is controlled. Every single individual piece of it is all controlled by capital interests, right? And when people have, there is disproportionate wealth inequality where some people have loads of money to spare and some people don't. The people with the money to spare are going to use their money to be able to keep it within their own hands. It's a failure of bourgeois democracy, because lobbying continues to happen. And corporations pay off politicians to do things in their interest. Otherwise, they would start losing, right? They would start losing because the many outweigh the few, right? You know, basic kind of maths at the end of the day. You've got way more working people than you have capital owners in this country. So clearly, policies should get made in their interests. But the people who have the power through capital can use the parliamentary system with which to adjust things to fit their own material needs and material interests moving forward, right? So that's why democracy cannot survive capitalism, because it will always be subservient to capital interests over those of the people, because having capital is having power within a commodified society.
Well, I have, I would say, increasing sympathy for politicians on both sides of the ideological spectrum as I get to know more and more of them. And the fact that the public tends to assume that the political life is a gravy train and that most of the people involved are there for what is in it for themselves. And I don't think that that's true, certainly not in a functional state. And it's very difficult for people who are managing a political career to also simultaneously manage their own stable finances and economic development. A lot of people take a big hit in their career development to enter politics. It's very unstable.
Exactly. You cannot really think to have to want to. You cannot really support your existence of your life on quadruple the average median wage in the UK. Clearly, this is not enough to be able to support your life as a politician. You may have to move down from a 6-figure salary down to a 5-year salary. That might hurt a lot of politicians who wants to get into the political system. I don't think they're doing it for their own personal gains. I think they generally want to help in their society. Fuck off. Nonsense. Again, it's not usual kind of Jordan Peterson liberal bullshit, where he doesn't talk about any kind of systemic issue, doesn't talk about incentive structures or what's at place with people. Just think, well, I've met some politicians. They didn't seem to me like they were going to be crooked or corrupt in any way. So I think they just did it to make a better world for themselves, rather than to be beholden to the interests of a specific class of people.
Lifestyle. And then they're also in interaction with people. You talk about lobbyists, but lobbyists have their viewpoint too. Lobbyists are people.
As a politician, I'd interject and say
I don't care about lobbyists, by the way. I do not care about the interests of lobbyists. They can go fuck themselves.
it's not, by the way.
What's that?
Certainly not an impediment in any way, shape or form, just for clarity.
Well, it depends on who you are when you enter politics. The man you talked about, for example, has to put his finances on hold in order to get to... Well, so you have a case right there where that's happening that you made.
But when we enter politics, we do so, firstly, knowing what the salary is, and it's an incredibly good salary, by the way, particularly for people from my sort of background. Mm-hmm. But more important than just the salary is the sacrifice that we all want to make to try and make people's lives better, to represent the...
It's triple the median wage, not quadruple. I just want to clarify that. But yeah, the point stands.
Public and improve their lives. That's the most important thing. Nothing
it's
to do
also
with
genuine.
ourselves.
It's also genuine in the case of most people on both sides of the political spectrum.
But the last few weeks have shown in the UK that it's not been genuine. People have been feathering their own nest to try and suit their own means, as opposed to looking after the public's interests.
Yeah, well, that does happen.
100% based. Could not put it better myself. And it happens on every single level within the Conservative Party and plenty of other parties too, but mostly the Tories, because those are the ones whose policies benefit the whims of capital.
Happen.
The woman there in the glasses.
Surely it's a choice as well that you get into that career.
Absolutely.
You know, it's not you take that sacrifice knowing that that's what you're doing.
So do you think MPs should have second jobs or not?
No, I don't.
Okay. Woman here in the pink top.
I just find it interesting how £20 a week can be taken away from the most poor people in society, and it's really difficult for those earning over £80,000 to think of losing some extra income.
So you're talking about universal credit. Yes, the woman there in the green sweater.
I mean, how can MPs do their jobs properly if they've got another job on the go?
Stella, I mean, the Labour leader had another job on the go, didn't he? I mean, he was earning over 100 grand from legal work.
You want the political knockabout on this, and I
think it's a fair point, isn't it?
I feel horrified by all of this, because I feel like I'm old enough to remember when we had the cash for questions crisis in this country. When I first started thinking about getting involved in politics because I wanted to change...
No,
I'm going back to John Major.
Oh, John Major, of course,
that's how old I am.
Okay. Because we could go back to the Blair government as well on other issues, but okay.
And at that time, it would have been shocking to me to think that the Prime Minister was involved. I didn't think John Major was involved. I just didn't think he knew that was going on within his own party. We know when the fish rots from the head, we're all covered by the stench. You talk about trust in politics. Right now, only 15% of people trust politicians to tell the truth. The frustrating thing for me is, no, I don't think MPs should have second jobs. I don't know where people would find the time, for goodness sake. I mean, in the last month alone, I've just had a baby. I've got no maternity cover as an MP. I'm trying to work. I had 3,000 emails and requests from my local community, and I've been trying to deal with all of them. So where people find all these extra hours. But
and in fact, you brought your baby along tonight.
I know.
He's backstage.
I have to. I'm working. And if you want to talk about getting more people into politics, maybe open it up to mums. Crazy idea. But one of the things that really worries me about all of this is what Owen Paterson did. The original thing that
like fucking the centrist, like Blairite Labour MPs, they won't criticise him because they know that as soon as they try and defend him, right, or try and criticise him, then they'll have to go back on the fact that Corbyn tried to make sure he didn't get the second job, right? That was Corbyn's doing, and they can't be seen to be permissive of Corbyn existing. Oh no, that is bad optics in Starmer's Labour. Yeah, it's on 1.25 speed. I can't watch things at normal speed anymore. I've not got time. Who's got time to watch things at regular speed? And the thing is, people who watch this VOD when I upload it to YouTube will be able to watch it in 2.5 times speed, because you can double the speed on YouTube. And on Twitch as well if you're on PC. Got so much content to cover. Like, I would watch this in 2 times. I know it's in 1.25 now, but I would definitely watch in double speed if I could. If I didn't think that there would be some people who put off by the content if I did it at like breakneck speed. like, or whatever. But you know, at least she's correct in the fact that she understands people shouldn't have second jobs, and it doesn't make any sense to have the time to be able to do the second job if you're spending all your time as an MP. But the truth is that the people who do take the second jobs as MPs, the second jobs they take are not exactly strenuous ones. They are a lot of money to do very little consultancy work to be able to then weasel in pro-capital positions into governmental policy to benefit whoever they are essentially lobbying for at this point, right? Like, so that's why Conservatives take a lot of second jobs, or they're landlords, in which case you do literally no work. All you do is just steal money off poor people, right? And that's why it's mostly Tories to have second jobs, because it's either paid lobbying positions or like extremely minor consultancy work where you get to have benefits with with a company so that you can implement policies that benefit them, or you can pass them along, I don't know, contracts when there's a big pandemic or whatever. Or they are just, you know, what are people like, you know, Keir Starmer, who take a main job they do a lot of the time, which makes being an MP ancillary to that, which are absolutely right. It's like, yeah.
Brought all this up. It's been illegal since the 1600s. It wasn't about whether you have a second job or not. It's about a conflict of interest. Yeah. Now, you know, there might be some second jobs. You might say, okay, you want people who are legally qualified because of the Attorney General. You might want people who are doctors who are qualified. But what you don't want is the conflict of interest. So I don't care whether you are doing 1 hour or 100 hours. If you are in hock to a private equity firm in the city, and therefore that affects how you vote, or it could affect how you're voting on the laws that regulate our finance in this country, we've got a problem. That's why people don't trust us. And the problem is, do I think, if I was that young, excited teenager thinking about changing the world when all that first happened, and I was horrified but thought that still government could do good, would I think that now, looking at this situation? That really troubles me. I don't think I would. And I think about all the voices and people who will just be put off because they think it's about money.
But just to be clear,
talking.
you started out saying you don't think MPs should have second jobs.
In fact, I would be the opposite. I'd be like, well, we need to have a bigger influx, right? If I was a budding politician, which maybe I am, my online presence talking about communist revolutions at this point probably negates my possibility of engaging with electoral politics on a major scale moving forward, right? Probably burned that bridge already with my current online presence, sure. But like, if I was still in a position where I did want to get involved in electoral politics, it's not a big thing, like it being people beholden to the money. That would make me want to get more involved, because I want to be able to be the voice of reason in that society. I want to be able to make the difference, I guess even on like a very small level, to be somebody who's genuinely fighting for what I actually ideologically believe in, and not, you know, the whims of capital, right? But then again, that's what the Labour Party should fucking be. It's called the Labour Party. It's the party of the unions. Their single interest should be for working class interests, right? We shouldn't have people like Keir Starmer talking to the CBI saying, well, we're going to talk about our fiduciary responsibility, you know, to the shareholders of the businesses that we represent in government. Like, fuck off. That's not your job as Labour leader. Like, what are you doing? Like, what have you been smoking? Clearly he's just another fucking Blairite neoliberal trying to trying to play centrist, right? But they shouldn't, like, I don't think that the idea. I think Stella Creasy is saying that people will be put off because they think it's all about the money. Well, surely the people who want to get into politics for bad reasons would also be put forward too. They'd be like saying, well, okay, I want to get involved because of the money. Many more people are going to more likely to be an MP because of this. I think that. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is just speculation. I've not talked to prospective political candidates who've been put off or been turned on to politics because of the scandal, so I couldn't possibly comment. It's only speculation.
It sounds to me like you're saying if they're a doctor or a nurse, then maybe yes, they should, which is the Labour position.
Actually, the main thing, I think, is that we should get the government, we should get parties out of this, and we should get the Standards Committee, which is a cross-party organisation, has lay people on it, to get them to look at it and look at whether we might have exceptions. And the only reason I think about doctors and nurses is because you have to keep your professional qualifications accurate. So there's a technical thing there. I don't think there's a particular case for lawyers. Yeah, I want to be clear about that. But you know what? The government has made such a hash of this. The best thing they can do for our democracy is to get out of it and let a group of people who are experts in it and don't have that conflict of interest deal with it.
Woman here.
This is at 1.25. It is, yeah. But I still think that even if you are a doctor or a nurse or whatever, you still spend enough time at your other job. You don't really have enough time to, you know, meaningfully work properly as an MP, right? You don't have enough time to put towards your MP's duties if you have another kind of job, right? Having the qualifications, absolutely. Having had the experience to be able to get the qualifications to show that you have a history of understanding what the workplace is like for regular working people, absolutely fine, 100%. But if you can't put 100% your kind of spoons, I guess, towards dealing with your MPs, if you've not got to be able the time to spend on your constituents' needs and your role as an MP, you should not be one, right? People have to be able to depend on you as an elected representative, and they can't do that if half of your time is spent doing something else, because then you don't have the time. Like, she's absolutely right. Like she spends 3,000 emails in one day or whatever. You can't do that and also spend 60 hours a week being a surgeon or a GP.
In the front.
I totally believe what you're saying about the conflict of interest and agree with you on that point. But I do think it matters whether they're spending 1 hour or 100 hours on a side project. Because if you're truly representing your constituents, if you're truly preparing for participation in a governmental process, then that should take the full focus of your time.
Believe me, it does. Believe me.
And the woman here.
Yeah, just to respond to one of the points, I think the run-up to election is long enough for MPs or future MPs to get their finances in order before they enter the House. And a 5-year contract at £82,000 a year plus expenses seems a pretty stable contract to me.
This is public service. This is not about the money.
I don't mind them having second jobs as long as it's stacking the empty shelves in supermarkets, HGV lorries, or picking fruit, because then they'll understand the consequences of their decisions. I also think that if you're involved in working in the public service, doctor, nurse, social worker, that kind of thing, I think there's some value in doing that, because you, as ministers or parliamentarians, you're responsible for the public service. It gives you an insight. Again, it's about how many hours, but it gives you an insight as to what's happening in those.
But also, some ministers are responsible for business. Do you think they shouldn't work? Some ministers are responsible for business. Do you think they shouldn't work in businesses?
Well, I draw the line there, and I draw the line simply because of this. I think having a second job that's in a private organisation, profit-driven, changes your first job. Simple as that. Never mind the conflicts of interest and the potential conflict of interest, etc. The reality is that you are the voters of Beckenham. Did you appoint or did you elect an MP for Barclays or an MP for Beckenham? You've got to ask yourself, in terms of your perception, is this person amplifying your voices or somebody else's voices, some corporate's voices? I think that's where the tension lies, and it's about perception rather than reality, or as reality. It's important that you know that your MP is working for you.
I know
It's been good. Well, I disagree that it's about perception rather than reality, because it is certainly about reality. It's absolutely about reality, and the reality is the Conservative Party are completely beholden to corporate interests, right? Like, that's just a reality. They've been governing by brown envelopes since time immemorial. Like, so it's about both, really, about both perception and reality.
You know, I know a lot of people who have staggeringly successful careers, and they're often loath to go into a political field despite the tremendous expertise they've developed.
How about that's a pretty good thing? If they're in the position where they are unable to take the pay cut they have to do to become a member of parliament, then maybe they should stick to their day job and then leave the governance of the country to people whose interests are that of the general public, rather than the large business sector that they would be in as a successful individual.
Because they have to put everything that they've already accomplished on hold or in hawk, in a sense, to enter the public sphere. And I think one of the I understand the conflict of interest problem, but one of the problems with that is that the most highly competent people in many fields are dissuaded from a political career because it requires the unproductive sacrifice.
But also, like, competency is not measured by the amount of money they fucking make, right? This kind of conservative brain poison that monetary success and financial success is this great barometer of your own personal critical faculties, and not just an exercise in what it is, which is literally just making money off of, usually extracting worker value and also taking money away from the general public, right? I hate this parallel they draw completely fucking farcically and nonsensically between financial success and your own personal critical faculties.
Of everything they've built. And so what that does in some sense is deprive us of some of the best people who could be considering politics as a mode of public service.
You've given us no reason to believe why these people would be the best people to be MPs. Like what how successful in what, like, clearly it obviously means financial success, right? Because otherwise that's where the pay cut comes in, right? That's where the loss of pay. So, well, if they're going to be successful, if they're successful financially, they're not going to want to change that by becoming an MP. Why is you've not detailed to me why financial success should be the barometer of this particular position? Why is financial success? Why is that kind of codependent on being a good? Why is being an MP codependent on being financially successful? Why would that make you a better MP? And again, as a socialist, I would argue that it literally makes you the opposite of that. It makes you completely divorced from the life of real people out there. You get confined to this financial chamber of like this financial echo chamber, of corporate interests. So you physically cannot govern. You cannot govern in the interests of regular people because you are so blinkered by the position that you hold in society. Well, he doesn't understand fucking anything. The guy's. It is incredible to me that this man is considered a public intellectual. Like, he was on Twitter saying, well, how can they predict what the climate is going to do in 20 years when they cannot even predict what's going to happen to a stock price next week? As if the magical inner workings of the stock market are somehow analogous to incredibly complex and well-designed climate models that have been used for a very, very long time and have shown already to be incredibly successful in predicting future climate patterns, right? Like, how divorced you have to be from scientific consensus to tweet out that inane shit, to tweet out such fundamental garbage. You have no idea what you're talking about. Like, how this man is considered a public intellectual is embarrassing. It's an indictment. He's the stupid person's clever person. Councillor said that literally the best people qualified to be councillors are councillors arguing against new blood. Well, that's the Greek kind of idea, isn't it? In that we should have a ruling class who are trained to be the ruling class, right? Who are specifically chosen from birth to be the ruling class, or not from birth, from early age or whatever, to be trained to be leaders, right? I forget who that was. I watched the philosophy YouTube video, but I've forgotten who it was who was talking about that kind of shit. Which I obviously disagree with, but I think that's what your counsellor is almost saying, in that by training to be a counsellor, that makes you a good counsellor, rather than having the experience necessary.
And so that's a complicated problem to try to solve.
Woman there in the green top. Hang on, wait a minute. Let's just get the mic to you. There you go.
Why do we assume that such people are the best people? They're obviously not
No, because
the best
they've
people for the
demonstrated
job.
extreme competence in at least one area of
That's
inquiry.
banking. That's that. So this is why we're in the situation where we are with people like politicians that we have at the moment that are corrupt. There's no transparency. There's no accountability that you get in industry. We don't even have it in our politics at the moment.
But that's not
because
why
of
you
this
have corruption.
attitude
No.
That what is perceived as a good leader.
No,
And
that's not
what
why
the
you have that
issue
problem.
is.
Most people who are successful in their given field aren't corrupt. It's very difficult to become successful and be corrupt.
So
I
we're
know
making
people
that-
That is bollocks. That is absolute bullshit. It's difficult to be It's difficult for me to be successful and to be corrupt at the same time. What absolute nonsense! What the fuck is he talking about? He's not even going to quantify that. I mean, actually, he looks like he's about to quantify that. He's not going to properly quantify that. Is what I should have said. I don't think he's going to adequately quantify that. What he's just said there. I don't think he has got a real understanding of. I guess because he's just kind of blindsided by his absolute hatred of anything like even resembling Marxism. That he can't understand the systemic incentives under capitalism, which would lead to someone being corrupt, right? But anyway, it's so obvious. It's so obvious that the way to be successful is to shit on other people. You get rich from taking money away from people, not giving it to them. Benevolence gets you fucking nowhere. Jesus Christ, Jordan, I've not been alive. exactly, 100%. Nonsense.
I like to think that, but it's just not true.
Corruption is good. It's acceptable.
Look, 3% of the population is psychopathic, and it never really goes above that. And the reason that it never goes above that is because being psychopathic is not a very good strategy. And so the idea that people in power are corrupt by definition, especially if they've built up their stature and influence as a consequence of competence, is simply wrong. And so you do.
But you've not shown why it's competence that got them there in the first place. It is being completely cut through and unwilling to have any kind of understanding of the material, impact of the things that you do to be able to get far in the business world. It just is. That's been the concept forever. You have to step on people to get up to the top. That's the nature of hierarchy. It's just that this fucker here thinks the hierarchy is innate to human understanding, innate to human experience, and something that we should fucking cherish, rather than something that we should challenge on a fucking fundamental level, right?
You want people who've demonstrated high levels of competence in at least one other field to serve as potential political candidates. What else would you use as a criteria for their ability?
So why is
What
that
else do you have?
3%?
Someone who understands what being a fucking normal person is like, Jordan. How about fucking that, right? Somebody who's on the grounds, who knows what they're talking about, who's been living the life that a general person lives for a long time, right? That is clearly the person you actually want in Parliament. Being a psychopath makes you perfect to utilise capitalism. True! True. 100% true.
Elevated as our leaders. Why is that 3% elevated as our leaders?
They're not. They aren't. That's wrong. And to think that way is counterproductively cynical. It's absolutely the case that institutions have a proclivity to...
It's not counterproductively cynical. It's just basic ideas of understanding of the incentive systems at play that do not prioritise being a good person. They prioritise being cutthroat, being completely unwilling to think of other people's needs, and being entirely self-serving. That's the word I'm looking for. Entirely self-preservation is what gets you that far. It's nothing to do with benevolence or anything like that. And he has made no case to quantify the shit that he's saying here.
Towards corruption under some circumstances. That's true of all institutions. But to blindly assume that that's more characteristic, let's say, of your political leaders than it is of you, for example, as a person, or that it's more specifically characteristic of political leaders than people who are operating at the highest level of their capacity in other areas. It's an empty sort of cynicism. It doesn't serve people well, and it's not true of reasonable governments or countries. It's simply not true.
Just very briefly, if I may, just on that point in terms of corruption and political leaders, everyone will be familiar with the fact that if you happen to donate £3 million to the Conservative Party, if you happen to be a former treasurer, then you'll so happen to end up in the House of Lords having been appointed by the, I think, Prime Minister. So there's a level of corruption that we probably need to look at in a little bit more detail, John.
Interesting that he doesn't turn his level of cynicism. He thinks that it's okay to be cynical of something I don't know, the Chinese Communist Party or the Soviet Union, which he quite rightly criticises for being corrupted in a position of power, right? Yet somehow when it's a capitalist in power and the only thing and the reason that they're there is because of money and influence that they've gained through being successful within the capitalist game, right, and making the most money, they've been successful at that. Somehow he's got no criticism for it. And I think his criticisms, I think most people I would understand. They were reasonable and good critiques of the leadership structures of the Chinese Communist Party and the Soviet Union, etc., in places like Cuba, like countries that purport to be wanting to move towards communism, right? Or at least did with regards to the USSR, right? And you would have legitimate criticisms of the power structures that exist there and the ways in which people get to power and the level to which the things are unequal through to the corruption that happens, right? It's somehow, when it's capitalism that happens, it's just natural selection. It's just the meritocracy choosing the best people to be at the top. Fuck off, Jordan. You know better than this. I mean, obviously he doesn't, but he should know better than that. Oh yeah, the tip link doesn't. Oh, I'm sorry, you couldn't tip there, Savage like Fred. Yeah, my PayPal got banned because PayPal is shit. Sorry. I appreciate you wanting to give me money. You drop if you want to drop bits, then feel free. Yeah, I can't use PayPal at all anymore ever. I have a backup PayPal that I use for like when I'm selling stuff online, but that's got my dead name on it, so I can't really use that for my tip link. If you really want to donate, and I thank you that you do. A subscription or bits the best way to do it. I really need to remove that from... Hey! Thank you for the subscription, Fred. It's much appreciated. Or Savage Life. I don't know if your name is actually Fred. Are you Savage like the footballer, Fred? I'm not even sure. But I really appreciate the subscription. It's great to have you to join in the No Justice stream today. But last, reasonable government was probably the Attlee administration, to be honest. At least Blair ran a budget surplus. I may have done a load of shitty things, but at least the finances are all in good name. All right, okay, no worries, mate. Again, thank you for the subscription. It's much appreciated. Let's continue.
The man there in the blue sweater, you've had your hand up for ages. Yes.
Rather than banning the second jobs, do you think if all members of Parliament were allowed to have as many extra jobs as they want, they had to be unpaid, or the proceeds had to go to charity, things would change?
Well, that's a proposition, Nims. What about that?
Well, I think the gentleman's right. Many MPs have other roles. They are not other jobs. So patrons of charities, trustees, they are supporting and helping matters in their community. It's the paid advocacy, the fact that you could be affecting
Yeah, no one cares about the charity shit. Let's move on, Mims.
Legislation because you're paid for another job is a completely different scenario.
Well, the question is about, is it time to outlaw second jobs for MPs, or would we risk a brain drain? And we had a member of the government talking yesterday morning, I think it was, saying, well, maybe they could do up to 20 hours a week, which is what, 2.5 days.
So
That's quite a
let me try and answer a few points. First off, as Stella said,
But it's not like I understand the time constraint issue there. Like, sure, like I said before, that people who are spending more time doing their regular job than they are being an MP can't really put enough time towards their jobs as an MP. I get that, but the people who are the biggest problem with corruption are people who are working like a couple of hours a week, because essentially they're just getting paid to put policies in place that favour corporate interests, right? That's all they're doing. Like, any actual job description they have is essentially just a sinecure at best. A half a sub to an affiliate, yeah, half a sub goes to stream. I think you get 75% if you're a partner, which obviously I'm not. The actual bit value goes directly to the streamer, but you pay more than the value of the bits when you buy them off Twitch. So I get slightly more money from bits, but whatever subscription's good as well. Like, it gets me more sub points for more emotes and things like that too. So I'm not too fussed. But again, any support is always appreciated. I do this for fun. So anything that is shown to be people enjoying my content, that's what I like. Yeah, it's much appreciated, Sean. I do appreciate it.
As a constituency MP, my casework is quadruple what I would normally expect it to be, because people have been going through a difficult time and things are tough out there. And so, as Stella says, I'm a single mum. We're busy. You're a busy mum with 2 little ones. It's hard. And
So how do they find the time for all these jobs?
Well, I think at different points in your career with different expertise or different interests, if you're particularly interested in supporting issues around children, you'll spend more time on helping with children charities and things like that. So there might be times when you go further into something because it's something you've previously been involved in, and also your own local charity, your own constituents want you to be doing more, whether it's or can be or things like that. So can I just quickly come back to a couple of points? Number one, the Standards Committee, the vote has gone through. We'll be hearing further by the end of January. It'll be going through the House, and we'll all have to make a judgment on what's acceptable, etc. Primarily, we are all here for public service, exactly as described. You give up those lucrative careers or less lucrative careers. I came into politics as a woman returner. I wasn't giving up anything lucrative. I was trying to go and do the next stage of giving back after being a local councillor. On the point in terms of the universal credit support, today we laid the regulations that some of our most vulnerable people will be £1,000 better off this year because of the taper rate changes, the work allowance, which will help to fill some of those gaps and those jobs that need to be done. And we have got over 1 million vacancies in this country. We want people earning and progressing in every sphere. And it shouldn't be about the jobs that MPs are doing. It should be about the opportunities we're all having.